Woohoo! All right, everyone, we are back. Yay, thank you. And Michelle's back with us, and she's going to talk about understanding the brain with trauma in mind. And I'm happy to have her back. She is the family engagement specialist with the Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. I put in the chat the resource handout if you didn't see it in your confirmation email, as well as an article that Michelle's going to discuss today about ACEs. You should be able to access both of those. If you don't already have them, they should be in the chat. Please let me know if either of those links do not work. Couple housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, and hopefully this time it sticks. And it will be available on our website probably by next week. It takes me a little bit to get it downloaded and on YouTube and all that good stuff, but then it's available on our website. If you don't want your face or voice to be recorded, now is the time to mute your camera and mic, which it looks like everyone did. If you have trouble with your audio, you're welcome to call in. That is totally fine. And you can ask questions at any time. I will monitor chat, and Michelle's usually pretty good, and we'll make sure your questions are answered. So you're welcome to use that chat box. And we are using Zoom today. So if the webinar is hacked or any appropriate languages or images appear, we'll do everything in our power to lock the meeting, and we'll cancel and reschedule. Fingers crossed. It's never happened in a year of doing this. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it doesn't happen today, but it's Zoom, so we never know. And just a reminder for everyone, next Thursday is our training on equity and after school STEM strategies and resources, and that is with the national Million Girl Moonshot Grant. So they have some really great resources for everyone to hear about. And then April 22nd is Reaching More Youth Through Authentic Community Partnerships, and that is with Alan Taggart, who we had last month. He's coming back for a second part of his series. So keep those in mind, and you can register for those at idahooutoFschool.org/webinars, assuming that the links work, because I don't know what happened, but somehow they broke this last time and we have fixed them at the last minute. And without further ado, I will turn my time back over to Michelle, and I will stop sharing, and now you should be able to share. And welcome.
All right. Thank you. You can see I changed the title a little bit, but it's still the same thing. It's about trauma and the brain. And there's a reason for that. The reason, as I got ready, I thought, when we focus on trauma, sometimes that's not very strength-based, right? Like what has happened versus what are the strengths we're building on. So really, if we understand the brain, we can understand what it means to heal from that trauma. And you guys have a unique role and we'll talk about that too in this healing journey, and for kids who are have parents who are helping them out of that trauma. So I am Michelle Batten. I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator at Idaho Federation of Families. And you guys are right over my notes. I'm sorry, I'm taking a minute to move your faces in Zoom. I work at Idaho Federation of Families, and what tied me in there is my own lived experience. I grew up in a family with foster siblings and an adopted sister, and I found that my sister experienced the world much differently than those siblings of mine who arrived via birth to my mom. And so I always wondered, what was it that made that impact? She came to us at 11 months of age with severe neglect, and the impact on her life was quite drastic in how she experienced relationships, how she learned, how she did the world. And so that experience drove me to always have that question, what was different? So anyways, my sister Lisa always was in the back of my mind as I did studies in child development, human development, and I kept pursuing that. And then about 10 years ago, I came alongside families in our church who were fostering and adopting, and I discovered trust-based relational intervention. And that really married the idea for me of hope and healing and what I believed with what I had learned about child development. So a lot of my work has been since then working with foster and adoptive kids, and no child comes into a new family without some trauma. So that's where my experience and knowledge base and understanding come, but really that is developmental trauma, and it goes across a broad range of trauma. So we're not just talking about kids who are foster and adopted, but other kids as well. And we'll talk about who falls into that category. So I came to IFF as the trauma specialist. I'm now the family engagement coordinator, and I work to provide education events, support groups, and we're working on a conference right now for children's mental health. And we also have youth programs that I help with too. So anyways, I'm here to talk to you today knowing that you guys make a big impact in children's lives, and wanting to come alongside and helping you understand what trauma is, and then how it impacts the brain, and what your role in that is, and how it might be affecting the kiddos you work with. So I would really much prefer not just looking at my laptop screen and having a purple screen in front of me, but would much prefer that there's some chat and questions and conversation as I talk. So if you guys could just put in the chat box, just how does trauma impact your work? Like, what do you see trauma doing to impact your work? So the goal of today is just to help define what are the risks that put someone in the category of trauma, and then understanding that impact on the brain, exploring how relationships provide healing, because that's where you guys come in, and then just a few little techniques for regulation. And so those are really important pieces for today, and where we want to go. And when we talk about it, it's important to know that like trauma really impacts the brain when, for example, the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain don't communicate the same way, because the neural network in between the two sides for someone who has experienced trauma is different. And so we can see the brain, or when we look at the brain, we can see that the two sides don't communicate different. You can imagine what that means for processing speed or for the way someone learns. And so that's why this is important for you guys to understand how it impacts the brain, and then what you guys can do to promote healing and understand different learning.
And Michelle, we have a couple of comments in the
Yes.
that we have a couple of comments saying that they're seeing behavior or undesirable behavior due to trauma, or they perceive trauma in their programming.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then that dysregulation impacts the rest of your learners, right? Because that's a difficult experience as well. So it's important to understand that, and then gather those techniques, trying different things, and figure out where you can bring healing. So when we talk about trauma, oh, by the way, I'm a trust-based relational educator. I forgot a word there, trust-based relational intervention educator. And you'll see that little symbol there at the bottom. Those are slides I've borrowed from Texas Christian University, and then I've added some of my own slides. So that's why I'm just pointing that out, that these risk factors are defined by them. Difficult pregnancy, difficult birth, early hospitalization, abuse, neglect, and trauma event. You can imagine, if you look at those three top ones, my own first child experienced those. It was a difficult pregnancy, difficult birth, and he had so many ear infections those first few years. So that's uncontrollable, right? That's a trauma experience, and a kiddo who had a different brain, because, and we'll talk about that why in a minute, but his brain was different, and I didn't see those risk factors. All the work I had done in child development, I didn't even see that these things were happening. And then my parenting style really impacted that afterwards, because I was with that first kiddo, a really anxious mom without a lot of support. So anyway, so we could talk about that, but these are the risk factors that we look at and think, okay, how does that, as we're gathering information about a kid and trying to understand who they are and how they learn, that these are some of the things we might want to explore. So another way to look at trauma, besides those risk factors, is adverse childhood experiences. Some of you may know about this, but we call these the ACEs. well, I'll get to when, but in the CDC and Kaiser Permanente looked at adverse childhood experience. In the study, it was one of the largest, looking at neglect and abuse and household challenges and the outcomes on later life health and well-being. And so the original ACE study was between 95 and 97. And what's so interesting is compared to 95 and 97, until recently, this was our framework, like, oh, look at ACEs, this is what's going to predict and outcome for well-being and outcome for health. But we now have other tools, and the flip side of the adverse childhood experiences is how we can bring healing and address these issues. The ACE score looks at physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and physical neglect and emotional neglect. It looks at things like living with someone who's mentally ill or suicidal. It looks at jail time and ethnicity and race and all different complexities of development and how that impacts development. But what is great is the idea for me is always the hope and healing, and looking at community strengths model and looking at how we can impact a child's development with relationships and how the community can impact it. And that's where you come in. When we're looking at Idaho, I think you guys had, Diana shared in the resources, if I'm correct, Diana, you shared the articles that we referred to.
Yes, and if they want to pull up the article, I linked it again in the discussion.
Super.
And I also want to mention that the original ACE study is on our website under
good.
BMI if they want to look there as well. So
super resource, the resourcer. So this is more recent, looking at our ACEs in Idaho. And so this is the Idaho in general. It's interesting because I might have guessed that there would be a higher number of ACEs. But when and the reason it's divided, the ACE score goes from 0 to 10. I'm surprised at how many people have 0, honestly, because life is hard, right? Like kids grow up and there's a divorce, or kids grow up and they have COVID hit. Kids grow up and things happen, right? And that's typical. What's not typical is 4 more ACEs, and that's the number where this cut off, why they didn't say 8, 10, because we know at 4 and more that ACEs really impact outcome and health. And that's where we look at, because if we can address those ACEs, if we can, as a community, build supports into people's lives for 4 or more ACEs, we're certainly helping the child who's experienced 1 ACE. So, but what we look at is providing the safe and stable relationships for healing, but we have to understand that impact of trauma. So out of this article that was shared, 65.1% of Idahoan adults have, well, this article didn't say that. I read another article, I should put it there, have experienced some kind of adverse childhood experience. So actually, you add that up and there it is. It's some kind of experience is at least 65.1%. That's quite a few, right? But we're only looking at a low number, or well, almost a fourth of people have had 4 or more. And so that's really important as well for us to look at too. Idahoan adults is who this was looking at, not children. So we have to look at the adult population to understand that these things are also generational. They often are generational unless we do our own fierce work. So anyways, it would be really interesting to look at this article and just understand. There's also articles, and I didn't ask if Diana put those there, but according to the regional regions in Idaho and how the ACEs came out there. So
I didn't link regional, but I can.
Yeah, it's just if people are interested in that, that's really just an interesting thing to see the differences. They're not gigantic, but we do find that there's places in eastern Idaho where there's really great resources And there's regions where we already have community supports that work really well together. And you'll see that less so in our rural parts of Idaho. So important to look at and understand where you come from. So why should we be concerned with brain growth when it comes to all of this? And that's for things like what I said about the brain, both sides of the brain working together. Where I typically look and where I am so interested in is attachment. And the reason for that is because relationship brings healing and helps kids regulate. Because a lot of the traumas we talked about, whether it be divorce or jail or abuse or neglect, those are relational traumas and impact how the child sees the world and how they function in relationships. But the early place where we look at relationships is this attachment cycle. So can you guys see my pointer here? You can, okay.
Yes.
So what typically happens is there's this distress and then comfort. And so we see this cycle of what should happen is the baby is distressed and a consistent caregiver comes and comforts that baby. And they learn this pattern for relationships, that someone is consistent and someone knows how to give me care and meet my needs. And that impacts the nervous system, that impacts our neurotransmitters. And what happens is when the consistent caregiver doesn't come, the child stays in this side of dysregulation, in this side of sympathetic nervous system and excitatory neurotransmitters continuing to go off. And then the child is not learning this side of the cycle, right? Not learning how to calm and co-regulate. So that's the beginning of a foundation. That distress calm cycle and impact in the infancy impacts how a child understands relationships and how they understand the world. And you might see that the kiddo who doesn't know how to calm down or hasn't learned some of that. Now, this obviously isn't the only reason for dysregulated kids. We get lots of pieces with sensory and other systems not working. But when I look at kids in the foster and adoptive system, this is certainly a big piece of what's gone on with them. So don't throw everyone under the bus of trauma. But we can understand that this is how we can calm someone, and that this relationship cycle brings healing even to other places. Because what we know is we need to calm down that nervous system. We need to calm down the neurotransmitters in order to bring comfort, in order to bring calm. And that's how kids learn. Some takes longer, but that's how kids learn to calm, is by someone else helping them regulate, and then them having someone external regulate. And then eventually, some people would say that we never get away from the outside people helping us regulate, because it's often that we have someone in distress times, even if we're alone, that we think of what they would say or how they would calm us. So this attachment cycle and understanding it is an important piece. And what we learn is that a consistent caregiver brings trust, self-worth, voice, we call it self-efficacy, but teaches us to use our voice, and then self-regulation. And this is the foundation for mental health. And I think I used this same example last time I talked, but I think it's important to understand mental health and the brain, and that is the bear in the room. I don't remember who was here last week, last time who was here again, but if you could put in the chat, what are some of the reactions in your body if you saw a bear? Unless you're from Alaska, because they learn how to handle bears. What is the typical response that if you see a bear?
I'm seeing fear.
Yes. And our hands might sweat, right? Our heart might race. Your eyes might dilate. Your throat might feel constricted. Your neurotransmitters, cortisol, adrenaline, those types of things that you have no control over, start taking over.
There's freeze, run,
freeze,
anxiety.
Yep. Yep, those are the things, right? Fight, flight, and freeze. We all have different reactions. But what's interesting, if I'm a freeze person and you're a flight person, we actually, in unless we have a lot of experience, we actually don't get to control our reaction to that, right? I might freeze and not have like my immediate response wasn't controlled. It was, that's how my body has learned to respond to these crazy things. So that's important, because when you have a kid in your room who is acting like there's a bear in the room constantly, that is really important, because we actually don't have control of the immediate first reaction, and we might we might need someone to help us calm. Like you think of that response of the attachment cycle. Let's go back there real quick. You think of this response over here of distress, the bear is in the room. We might need someone to help us out of that. And so that's really important to realize that that those immediate responses aren't actually chosen. Sometimes adults think that we choose those responses, and he has the skills in other places. He's in the other classroom, he's fine. So why can't, when after he walks down the hall, why can't he calm here? And so it's important to realize that what's going on with that kiddo, because they might be living with the neurotransmitters, with the excitatory nervous system, that there's a bear in the room, and that impacts their brain. The brain and all those neurotransmitters, and you living with a bear in the room constantly is difficult at best, right? So they're living in fight, flight, and freeze, and that's where their brain is responding. The back of their brain, the really lower part of their brain, is where they're living. And so we have to do things that help them use the front of their brain, get them out of the back of their brain so that they can be in a learning environment. And I'm not just talking about learning ABCs or learning trig, right? I'm talking about learning social, emotional. We are talking about cognitive, but even physical development is impacted by all these neurotransmitters. There are kids I sometimes work with who are the tiniest kids. They're just muscle, and they eat like a teenage man, a teenage boy, right? Like they just consume food. And it's because their system is so hyped, right? Like their metabolism is up there because they are in that constant state. On the other hand, we also know that some people drop into the dorsal state where their bodies just slump, right? Like our response to COVID, right? Whether you've been the person who's done more, or whether you've been the person who's just sat at your desk here, right? And what is your response? Is it, I'm certainly someone who's more sluggish after this year, right? Like where do you drop in that? And some kids end up being larger kids, and it impacts their physical development. So understanding that the whole body, it's a system, and the whole body is impacted. We can't expect kids to emotionally grow. We can't expect kids to socially grow. We can't expect kids to cognitively grow in on the right trajectory when they've experienced trauma. And that's why it's important, because those are all brain things. The brain is, of course, the powerhouse to a lot of that. And even things like sertraline. Did you know how much sertraline is? That's the I said sertraline. I don't mean that. That's the medicine to help you create it. The neurotransmitter is dropping out of my head. I can't think of it. I don't know why. I use this example all the time, but so much is created in your belly for calm and happy. And that feeds into the brain, because the brain and stomach are connected. So understanding that those things are impacting the brain is really so important, that they're living with a bear in the room. I'm doing a time check here. We're at 10:30. I'm really talking fast. I'm sorry. I'm going to slow down now.
It's okay. Melissa and I were saying that we're on the sluggish end of this spectrum of this group trauma that we are all experiencing.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? I never watched TV in my life. And last night we're like, maybe in my life is a little exaggerating, but in my adult life, it's not my thing. I much rather jump into a book. But we were just saying last night, like, what do we do besides TV? We forgot this year, right? Like we just are more couch potatoes. So really interesting.
And then I wanted to just maybe that we as adults
Please.
Don't get to choose what a child sees as a bear. And sometimes that's
Yes.
hard for us because
Oh,
we're like,
good.
it's not a big deal. Like, why are you upset? And then they're living in this totally different mindset. And sometimes as adult, we try to regulate what a bear is.
Yes.
And it's like, that's not how that works.
And what's interesting is, Amy, if we were in the same room and I started seeing you distressed, I wouldn't think, oh, I get to choose that she shouldn't really be this overreactive over being, some big thing that's something that seems big to you. I wouldn't think in my compassion that I got to choose that for you, right? But somehow when it's my own child or a kid in a classroom or a kid I'm working with, I think, oh, I have to fix this and help them regulate. And this isn't that big of a deal. We've seen them use these skills before, right? Like they can calm. But yet it is like, if we can be compassionate to understand, their brain is telling them there's a bear in the room, right? That's an interesting thing. So I saw someone jump on. I'm hoping I'm not.
Oh, it's Anna.
If there's anything. Okay.
Welcome,
Good.
Anna.
Hello. Yes, I just didn't want to be, if they were getting on to ask a question. All right. So I always think that it's interesting to look at what is for the kiddo who had that calm, consistent caregiver who helped regulate them, and then they learned those skills, that their brain was ready to learn those skills, because we do have to account for some kids are not able to learn that skill at least as quickly when they have, even with a adult who calms them and is consistent. So when they have that calm and caring adult who consistently provides the regulation, what's the outcome? What's the big deal, right? What does it look like to be healthy? And that would be what we label secure attachment. Interestingly, when you look at that ACEs score we get, and how many people have had 0 ACEs, that's about the same number of people that we statistically get with secure attachment. So that's an interesting side note, because that really does, they do correlate. They do have something to do with each other. So anyway, so the secure attachment is really not the place where we get to step in as the non-parent, but what is healing is relationship. And this is why, is that we've seen the flip of ACEs, and when we look at a community model of strengths, a caring adult, a single caring adult in a youth's life brings healing, that the outcome is really different. So we need to look at that and recognize the impact on one person, even, right? The one relationship we get to build that's meaningful to these kiddos. So the outcome of that is being able to give care to other people. We would sometimes see that as empathy and compassion and being able to understand the person, but caring for the other person. Receiving care, if you've ever been around someone who can't accept that care, you know what I'm talking about, but both giving and receiving care. Negotiating needs. So being able to say, for a kid, I need a drink of water. For an adult, I need a raise, right? Like we can correlate these things, that there's adult skills and kiddo skills. And for being autonomous, that means that I don't get my feelings all mixed up with your feelings, and I allow your feelings to be yours, and I act independently. I don't have to do that. So when you look at this, some of us are really good at giving care. Some of us have strengths in other areas. Secure attachment is that we can kind of do all these, but the truth is we're sometimes it's earned secure attachment. So sometimes when we do our own fierce work, we move from an attachment style that maybe isn't as healthy to the secure attachment, and we bring with us skills, the skills that were maybe brought through by trauma. I'll give you an example. My own story meant that as the oldest kiddo in a family, I really scanned my environment to know what the emotional temperature was for each person. So that meant as an adult, I'd walk into a room and I always was aware of people, and I'd stand back for a few minutes. So that's not really great when you're trying to build new relationships, to walk in a room and be standoffish, but it is really good when I'm one-on-one to be, I can read people really well. So while it was a trauma response built into me, I actually have Zoom is really hard for me because my mad skill really is reading the emotional temperature of everyone. And so it's hard to give difficult information like ACEs and someone discover that they have a high ACE score and not be able to read the face and help everyone. So, but in that secure attachment, I recognize that where my needs are and where the other person's needs are and negotiate that. So that's brain impact in my brain and how I see the world and understand the world. But when we do our fierce work, we can move to this place of attachment and our brains heal. And that takes people, and that takes relationship and consistent caring. The same things that it took for that infant is the same things it takes for healing to happen. So how can we do this? So getting out of the base of the brain. So what I mean by that is that fight, flight, and freeze, that very bottom part of the brain where the bear is in the room. How can we move a kid from there to the front of their brain, where they're making, and using both sides of their brain, where they're making decisions and actually learn to have some control over those behaviors, do learn to calm, because getting upset isn't the problem. Calming is the problem, right? Getting upset and being a volcano and exploding is a problem, but the typical emotion isn't the problem. What happens is we get kids who go out on the playground and the response on the playground is the same as the bear. You get sweaty, your heart is racing, you're breathing hard, your eyes dilate, someone's chasing you. Like those are fun things, but even if they're fun, it's still the same feelings as trauma. And if you haven't learned to separate those and understand the difference, you get a kid who comes in dysregulated, right? So we need to understand how to get a kid from the bottom of their brain to the top, so that when they come in for recess and their body's telling them there's a bear in the room, that we can help them calm so that they can learn to do that on their own. We engage the social system, we calm the brain, and we also offer compassion to get out of the brace of that brain. So engage the social system. What does that mean? You get to do that by saying, hey, tell me more about that, right? Tell me more about your problem, or tell me more, so that there's this talking and giving and receiving. That idea of give and receive before that I talked about healthy, that this is a really important piece. And we can imagine that the social system, it'll be interesting to see the impact of the pandemic on this, right? Because how our social system has been engaging, even, for me, seeing Diana nod her head tells me what direction I'm going, right? Like we get feedback, and we've had so little. These presentations and this amount of interaction is my limit here. I might have another meeting, but this is about it, right? On Zoom. And so we have to recognize that our system isn't engaging the same way. And so how does that impact kids? How does that impact your classroom? How does it impact it when their parents are dysregulated and so they don't have a consistent caregiver who's calm and able to give them what they need to calm? So at some level, people have felt anxiety this year, and that means that our emotions have been dysregulated, and isolation in relationships have changed. So we can understand our own information and understand how we've experienced these difficult things. And if we can process that, then we can understand how kids might experience that. So it gives us a great place to start, is with that. Tell me more. What was your experience? And another way to engage a social system is to say, I was thinking about what you said yesterday, because if I say that to Diana, she knows I'm holding her in my head that I was thinking about something she said. And so that means that there is still a social relationship outside of just this face-to-face. So that's a really interesting thing. There's a power in being seen and heard in the context of relationships. So that's really important.
And then Anna said she's also shaking her head, but her internet's slow. So she had to turn her camera off, which is, it's like that feedback.
Right, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
It really was the biggest thing. It's funny because if you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago if I would like public speaking, I would have said, I would say 5 years ago, no way, no how, don't put me in front of any type of audience, any type of camera. And it's funny because I had just started doing more and more public speaking, and now I'm behind a screen with no one, right? So it's kind of a funny thing. And I realized, I actually was trying for that feedback. So Anyways, engaging the social system is really a great way to get a kid out of the back of their brain to the front so that they have to talk. You're also using both sides of the brain when you do that, right? Which is, I'm talking ahead of myself, using both sides of the brain. Because using both sides of the brain means if we're using both sides, we can't be in the back of our brain. It brings us to more of the front and uses other parts. That's important. There's great ways to do that. And oftentimes in education, we talk about the receiving language and then processing that language and then putting out that language. That's using both sides of the brain. And it's a slower process for kids who've had trauma because, like I said earlier, the brain doesn't work that way. But how we can get the child to move into both sides of the brain is, here's one of my favorites. I might have told you guys about this last time, is the hand squeeze. Because the right hand is connected to the left side of the brain, the left hand to the right side of the brain, except for the thumbs. And I come back to that. But so that means when we alternate hand squeezing, right hand, left hand, that we will be using both sides of the brain. Interestingly, the thumb is not connected. The thumb is actually connected to the same side of the brain. So that's why you see kids struggle to use scissors, maybe, is because that right and left side of the brain has to work together to do simple things like scissors or fine motor, handwriting, coloring. So anyways, using that right left hand squeeze is a great calming. I remember one time I actually had a child who was probably first grade, but developmentally, because of trauma, we can expect a kiddo to be emotionally about half their age if there's trauma. So she was emotionally probably a 3-year-old. She fell and skinned her knee, but the whole group of kids gathered around because there was such a loud ruckus. And I remember just coming up behind her and doing the right left hand squeeze. And just that input in her brain was great. It helped calm her in a different way than she was expecting. So even holding hands is a great engaging that social system too. Deep breathing is another one to calm the brain, to bring the brain into that state of calm. And the reason is because when we do deep breathing, it calms our heart, and our heart is connected to the brain to give the brain that message. So the breath out is really important. When you take a deep breath in, you can hold it for a few seconds, and that breath out is what calms the heart rate. So that's when we're breathing fast, when there's a bear after us, our body gets the message, hurry up, we got to get away. But if we can calm that through that slow breath out. Crying is a good thing, right? Like, it's a lot of breath out. It's hard on the listener and it dysregulates us, but recognize that deep breathing. Compliment them. Wow, look at that good breathing you're doing. You're going right out, and that calms your heart. And I think kids are interested in that piece of, wow, my brain and my heart are connected, or wow, my stomach and my brain are connected, those types of things. Another type of activity is biking. This is more of a home activity, of course, but even still, like, you can find things that are both sides of the body that calm. Taking a walk. There's a reason taking a walk. If you can set up a space where kids have to get to choose to go to a calming area where there's maybe they walk on steps, and then there's handprints on the wall, and they cross their hands and do that kind of thing. Those are calming activities, and when kids can choose those, they begin to learn those regulation skills too. They have some there's that autonomy. And lastly, of course, is compassion. And I think compassion drives our desire to understand the story, right? You don't need to know their whole story. If there's a foster kiddo in your room, that's all you really need to know. You don't need to know what happened so you can understand their brain. What you can know is that trauma impacts the brain, and you get to enter in with relationship. And then you get to have compassion when they're dysregulated and think, oh, this is a kid who hasn't learned those regulation skills. And so they can't learn the things I'm teaching them. And so they can't interact in circle time because they're touching everyone, because they don't know how to calm their bodies. All those types of things that impact them. So it really comes back to understanding their story can be limited, and you still offer compassion. Know your own boundaries in that compassion. That comes back to my stuff and your stuff, and understanding that. It's important to know your role and where you are, that you're not the secure attachment figure, that You are the person who provides a consistent relationship in a specific space, and that's really important. And also recognize for the parents, I think this is just as important, is that we're all on a journey, and recognizing in parents that oftentimes a kiddo with trauma, that the parent is either experiencing secondary trauma, meaning that they are experiencing the trauma of their own kid, or they've lived a life of trauma, that they have a high ACE score and that they're on their own journey. And so they might not have the skills and the information to be able to give their kiddo. I think of when I work with foster kids, oftentimes that mom who has a kiddo in foster care, it ends up that they have their own high ACE score and they have so much to work through, and they don't have the skills. So if I can give them some of those parenting skills, some of these simple things of calming, they can begin to come down alongside their child. And also they can bring the good old trick of hand squeeze, or another one I use is chair push, right? Because that deep muscle input, but those types of things help parents too. And then it's a privilege. You get to be a part of the story of calming that brain and bringing healing to that brain, that we get to realize that, going back to that, we're all on a journey, that kids who have trauma will sometimes bring your own stuff up. And so you'll have unexpected responses. So being cognizant of your own responses and helping you go, I wonder why I acted like that, and realizing what's coming up in yourself, because you're no longer being able to be in a calming relationship and bring that regulation. So it's a privilege. It's a privilege that we get to be a part of children's stories. It's a privilege that we get to do things like play with them, because play teaches so much. It's a privilege that we get to teach them and help them grow physically and emotionally and cognitively. And so being a part of that story and understanding how their brains are working and how their story has impacted their brain is really important. So I talked really fast this time, so I got through all my slides. Last time I didn't feel like that happened quite as easy. So anyways, any questions about the brain or things you guys have seen and think, oh, what's a good idea? Because one of my favorite things is brainstorming. I am actually going to quit sharing, if that's okay. And then we can just, if there's any questions or pieces you can put in the chat box. I can look there now, I guess.
There is a few. We didn't know about the thumbs, and I didn't even know about the thumbs. So there. And
it's really interesting, because you think about third grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Third grade's just the typical age that there's a bigger and bigger gap. So
it's really, we
diagnosed.
Do an exercise where you have to like switch like this.
Yeah,
it's really hard. And now I'm
not going to try it.
That's why it's so hard.
Because you have to engage, but look, I can't do it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's
everyone try together.
There we go. I was like, you have to start correctly first and then do it. But yeah.
You do. Yeah. But you're right. That's why it takes both sides of the brain. And even if it, anyways, I have to think about that. That's really interesting.
And you've done with Andrew, right? You've done this one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
He's really big on both sides.
Question with the with the age of youth, and I missed the first part because I was on another call. But with regard to touch, do you see it different, like from kindergartners to like junior high, high school? Do you find the hand squeeze and the pressure working similarly?
Well, I think that so what I always like to think is, like, if we look at trauma as an impact on the brain developmentally, I can always go back to what does an infant need, right? Like the touch. An infant needs, in order to calm, an infant needs, that's why we papoose them, right? Like we put a little tight blanket on them, because that input, right? Or that's why we rock them, or that's why we feed them to calm them down. Like those are things an infant needs to calm down. So I can think of that as a teenager. Hey, do you want a drink? What do you need, right? Or hey, do you want, and so a warm and caring touch and a rub on the back, those are still the same needs. It translates differently, right? It translates developmentally appropriate. The thing is when you have a 16-year-old who's experienced trauma and they're acting like an 8-year-old, I think it's important to go, what does an 8-year-old need, right? Like what emotionally does an 8-year-old need if this kid can't can't act like, right? Developmentally isn't a 16-year-old. So yes, and
That
And
makes
I would add,
sense.
yeah, it worked for my husband literally yesterday. He came
I
home
think
and
that,
he
like,
was like vibrating. He was so worked up about something at work. I mean, literally was like, the bear was there and he was like, "Bleh," and I was like, we're just gonna hug for like 20 seconds, take some deep breaths. I was like,
proprioceptive,
yeah,
right?
I
Like
was
you
like,
get a lot of the
yep. Then I
system to
like
calm.
stand outside and play with your kid for 10 minutes. Like you need more
The
than,
outdoor, yeah, 5
yeah,
minutes in the outdoors is supposed to calm our bodies. There's another one that calms us, right?
sunshine. Like I was all of the tricks that I had for a grown adult man. It was like, you need a minute. You're gonna have a heart attack. Like, whoa.
My own kids have said, Mom, don't TBRI me.
So yes, I fully believe in the power of strong touch and deep breathing.
I see under the desk bikes are great too. Tell me more about that.
Well, so for those who have programs that can't let kids go bike,
Right. Well, that's
they
what I was
make the
thinking.
ones.
That's how I,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's what I was thinking. You're hitting it. That I thought that. What is that? This is an
So they
interesting
make those
option.
they're little pedal stations and they fit under
Oh,
desks and so at least that gets the movement in both
I love it.
exercise and that double brain both sides.
Yes, the fidgeter. It's a whole
Yeah,
different
it's easily.
gross motor for fidgeting.
Yeah, I was thinking stationary bikes, but most programs don't have room for stationary bikes.
No, right,
So
right,
these
right.
are nice to have that you can just slip under a kid's desk
I
or
like
their
that.
workspace or in
Yes,
that calming space, which I recommend everyone to have a good calming space. But yeah, under desk bikes.
I'm looking at some of the comments about like it's a hard thing to remember that everyone has their own bear. It's true, isn't it? That is hard to remember. It's hard to remember that, and it's hard to remember how important their bear is. Like it
Mhm.
can be theirs and not mine. I have to be there as a person to help calm and offer compassion, but I don't have to be a part of the bear. That's the other thing that's hard with kids.
I think that's really important to note as well, is I don't have to, like, my response does not have to be about the bear either, right? It's like I don't have to
Well,
rise to that and get upset and worked up as well, which I think is
yes.
another
And
really,
need,
depending on the
I love
bear, it's really
that.
hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think depending on the bear is the part of like, why does that bother me? Right? Like why is it for me? Why was it when I had kids in the home? Why was it the back talking that was my trigger? I can put up with someone else's dysregulated, like seriously, someone who I had to put alarms at nighttime, right? Like that's okay. But my own kids back talking me, why does that trigger me? Right? So typical in the typical range, right? And yet this other stuff doesn't. So I think we have to go, why does that bother me? What is my own stuff in this?
Right.
Good. All right. Any other questions?
Now's your chance, guys. Is there behaviors that you're seeing that you want thoughts on or questions about? I know at least 2 of these guys have taken brain training with me where we talk about typically developing brains. And I specifically say I'm not talking about trauma and neurodivergent brains because.
But you are. But that's all we have
We
to
are,
know.
right.
Like,
Because this all feeds in.
It does.
Right.
But that's my passion, is if we could see it through that lens of typical and go, oh, this 16-year-old is actually an 8-year-old. What do I expect of an 8-year-old? We can meet them there and they come along, right? Like we can bring them back on that typical. So
right.
It's good to study that typical.
So we talk a lot about what I call lizard brain, that fight, flight, or flee. And then like what happens up here, right, guys? I'm like pointing here because they all took training right here. Not developed all the way. Yes. Teach that.
Yes.
And before people log off, I have a survey that I need you guys to take.
There's just a really quick question here.
Oh,
also.
could you
It says,
talk about trauma brain and self-harm and what calming exercises might work on that?
Well, I think if we think about it as a bear in the room and like where their state is, so we need to give the skills outside of the time. So proactive teaching is really important, right? We don't you might be able to right left hand squeeze the child if they'll let you touch them when they're dysregulated, but teaching it in the moment isn't going to work. So we need to teach skills outside of is really important, right? That we need to give those skills outside of that situation. So the trauma brain self-harm, I think we have to look at what that's big, right? So we need to do calming exercises at other times. But one thing, if we're at the age of self-harm, I think we can also teach the child what's going on in their brain. That is so powerful to be able to teach like why they're doing that, what's going on. Self-harm is you're trying to escape the pain and cause pain, and because it's really about those neurochemicals. That's what self-harm is about, is that buzz, for lack of a better word, the excitement of seeing your own blood, of the harm and those types of things. So it's hard to say calming exercise for this behavior, but rather calming exercises for a brain that needs calming, right? Like a variety of things might work on that kiddo. It might be they do well with taking a walk, getting up every time that thought, but those skills have to be taught.
And Michelle, in allowing them to do it, we tell adults a lot to walk away or to take a break. And then we don't let kids do that. And we're like, you're going to sit here and you're going to look me in the eye and we're going to talk. Like, we don't allow for that. And so if you teach calming skills, then you have to let the kids do the calming skills.
Right.
Oh, like if we're going to say take a walk.
Self-harm. Right. I thought you meant self-harm. I'm like, wait, I'm trying to.
Yeah. Right. And I'm thinking, but we're teaching. Right.
Right. Yeah. So we do have to let them do that. Or I had worked with a parent and we were talking about, this child needed to leave the situation and then come back, that was the way that they calmed. Well, you can't punish them for leaving the situation.
Right.
We need to allow that to happen if that's the skill. And if we take a skill away, we need to give a new skill. So if you're going to take away self-harm, which obviously we want to take that away, we have to give something to replace it. We can't just say, stop this wrong behavior, right? So it's important to realize too.
And Melissa, I think she's like, I need to work on adding those exercises before the bear enters the room. And we teach, work on them as much as you teach kids where to put their backpack, right? You teach them how to calm down, what to do when they disagree.
It's like the backpack and calm down as you come, right? Like do those kind of things. And here's the thing is I got to be on a podcast talking about play. And I think that's where you teach the proactive, right? Like the proactive skills are taught in play. Like we learn as we walk from our backpack to sit in our chair that one way calming our body is right, left body work, so that we're learning and teaching. And that's part of playful silliness, so that when we need the skill, it's there, right? We don't just say, do your math problems and then you have the skill. We teach and have fun and play about that before the skills gained. So.
Right. We just talked in our behavior training, we do a behavior management institute, that those skills have to be taught and they have to be gone over. And just as much as we correct math problems and we're like, oh, you just didn't learn that the right way, right? We have to teach that with behavior and keeping that trauma in mind. And if you're starting an activity, you're going to do that. Let's all take 2 deep breaths and 10 hand squeezes and then do what we're going to play today, right?
Yes,
and here's what's going to happen if you don't want to do this activity. You can go here or you can step out, or right. We're going to teach that as we do it, and we're going to do it every time. So then those skills become really ingrained. Yeah.
And all of us need that. That way we get to practice it too for the dysregulated kids, so we can calm.
The adults take 3 deep breaths, hand squeeze, and then absolutely. And we're
Good.
right at our time. And if you guys
Good.
will just help me out, click the little survey link before you check out so it pops up on your screen, and then you can just do it. It takes like 2 minutes. I don't even know if it takes that long to just click a couple questions so that our funders are happy with us. And we can help you guys
Super.
find anything else you need. But yes, thank you
Super.
guys so much for
right.
coming.
All right. Thank you guys for having me here. And I'll
Thanks,
see you again, I hope.
Michelle.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Maria.